Next guest is a weekly guest. On Thursdays on BYU Sports Nation, he won the Super Bowl with the Ravens in 2000. He is an analyst. He is working on Ravens Saints tonight in the Superdome. He is a former BYU tight end. His name is Brian Billick, and he is on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. And Brian, what's the weather like in New Orleans today?
Yeah, I'll do my best weatherman bit here. I don't have any charts for it. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. We flew in yesterday. It was interesting when we were getting on the plane. The reports we were reading throughout, the number of reporters were reporting that the game was going to be canceled, which was interesting, getting on a plane, taking off to go to New Orleans, which turned out to be false. The weather here is great. Should be in great shape. So obviously it should be in great shape for Saturday as well.
Well, as you mentioned, BYU, LSU, that game's been relocated to New Orleans. And it's an interesting dynamic. What kind of an impact do you think that has on players and coaches?
Well, with the standpoint of BYU, probably not. You're going to get on a plane. You're going to go someplace. Now, whether it was Houston or now New Orleans, both indoor stadiums. So obviously the weather's not going to be a factor either way. Obviously, what's going on in Houston, ill-advised to play the game there. So from Coach Satake's standpoint, I don't imagine you're changing anything. It's just the location. Now, your support people got to scramble around a little bit, and that tests you as an organization. And also for LSU, obviously not traveling to Houston. They're just going to jump on the interstate and head down to New Orleans from Baton Rouge. So all things considered, I think the change of venue is going to be a minimal effect on either team.
We'll talk Ravens and Saints coming up, the game you're in town for. But first, let's talk about BYU and LSU. This is a big-time matchup for BYU on ESPN. 16-point underdog, Louisiana State obviously ranked. What do you think of the matchup between these two teams, Coach?
Well, I think it's better than that 16 points. I'm not sure there's going to be 16 points scored. I don't know. I don't quite understand that differential, because you're talking about two really good defensive football teams. And for BYU, I think their defense is going to hold up pretty good. I mean, they're a physical, talented group, make no mistake, and LSU is pretty darn good. But offensively, they're not as diverse or dynamic as some of the other offenses they might face. I think the defense will hold up pretty good. Now, the other side of the ball, the BYU offense is going to get challenged. What they can draw on their strength, obviously they ran the ball very well against Portland State. They didn't turn the ball over, and that's going to be key. You can't put the LSU offense on a short field. Now, what's got to get better based on the Portland State game? Penalties. You can't have the penalties. They had some big plays. I know people are a little concerned about the score differential. It would have been much more substantial except for a couple penalties. And third down. They've got to be a lot better on third down. They can't put their defense on the field as long as they might with LSU if they're not converting on third down.
Coach, let's have you play psychologist here. As Jerem mentioned,
weatherman and psychologist.
Weatherman and psychologist.
Wow.
We are adding so many titles to your name here. So as Jerem mentioned, 16-point underdog, and I guess a lot of this just is determined on whether or not you want to, admit to it or lend credence to the fact that somebody is considering you an underdog. But what is the mentality of a team when you walk into a game like this as a big underdog?
Yeah, it's us against the world. You go in with a chip on your shoulder. I remember when I was at Utah State as the offensive coordinator, we opened the season against Nebraska, in Nebraska. And so that was interesting, spending an entire offseason, entire summer, knowing that game was looming. And it was interesting. We got there. We actually scored on our own drive. So we're feeling all we did was tick them off. And then they just kicked the heck out of us after that. Would probably been better if we hadn't scored, because I think we upset them. But yeah, you can draw on that as us against the world, the chip on the shoulder. Nobody, but the people in this locker room think we can do this. Obviously, being in New Orleans from Baton Rouge, it's going to be full of Tiger fans. Although I'm sure the BYU faithful are going to show up as well. So you thrive on that, and you stay focused on it. You're certainly not intimidated by it, but you're respectful of the fact that this is a darn good football team.
LSU has a new offensive coordinator in Matt Canada. He came from Pitt, so there's a little variation there. LSU's always had a good defense. Where they've struggled is getting enough points in some big games. In fact, if they scored 15 points last year, they were 8-0. So which side of the ball, and this is our Twitter question today, Coach, who needs to have a bigger game for BYU to beat LSU? The BYU offense or defense? What do you think?
Well, I think the offense has to have a bigger game, and it doesn't mean they have to go out and put up 35 points. You're not going to do that against LSU. You assume the defense is going to play well. LSU becomes somewhat one-dimensional. They just want to physically overpower you. They're capable, if you're stacking the box, to get those big plays down the field. but they, for the last few years, really haven't been good enough at the quarterback position to kind of pick you apart. It's simply run, play action, fake, and throw the ball down the field. So I think BYU's defense will hold up. Like I said, offensively, it's a tough balancing act because it's, look, we need productivity. We need to get the ball down the field. But by the way, don't turn the ball over, because we can't turn the ball over and put that offense on a short field, meaning the LSU offense. So